Hello everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Scary Stories to Tell from the Res. I'm your host Jordan. And before we kick off tonight's show, I wanted to say thank you to everybody that's come out and shown support and love on the page, both on YouTube, Facebook, and those of you that are from TikTok. I want to say thank you to everybody. Your stories, as well as the attention and the views, really help and have made the first episode of Scary Stories to Tell from the Res a success. But those of you that listen to the true crime podcast, One Missing, One Murdered, all indigenous, know that we have a brand new sponsor here on Scary Stories to Tell from the Res. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the brand new Twisted Bear Studios, inspired by our brand new sponsor, Twisted Bear Boutique, which is owned and operated by my very special guest today, Alexis. Before I get too much into that, I wanted to share one quick story, because the interview that we have today is a little bit of a long one, but it's worth it, I promise. So I thought that we would kick the show off tonight with our first call-in story from a very close acquaintance of mine who would like to actually remain anonymous because they're from my hometown. So go ahead and pull up a chair and sit down with me by the fire as we talk about our first scary story of the evening. It was 1994 on the Ute Reservation in Yellowstone Community area. When I was young, my mom always told me not to look outside at night. I never paid attention to that. One summer night in July, my nephew and I were listening to the radio and talking and looking out the window. It was just open, just enjoying the evening summer air. Suddenly, we saw what we thought was someone walking with a flashlight in the field. It being summer, I didn't think much. I just thought someone was irrigating. Suddenly, the light started jumping from one end of the field to another, moving closer each time. We stared in disbelief, waiting for the light to reappear, but it didn't. Instead, a very, very tall man-like figure walked out of the darkness. He was huge and had a stick a foot taller than he was. He walked in front of us, maybe 25 yards away. He didn't look our way, just kept slowly walking. At that time, my uncle lived next door and had horses. The tall figure stepped over the corral like it was nothing. The horses reared up, but it just kept calmly walking. I don't know why we saw what we saw. I burned sweetgrass, and we decided not to repeat the story and just moved on. No one would believe us anyway. From that day forward, I shut my curtains when it gets dark, and I never look outside. Well, I want to say thank you so much. Indeed, here on the Res, we're always told not to look outside. How many of you heard, you don't look outside because something just might be looking back at you? This might go a long way to prove that. But what do you think you saw? What do you guys think that she saw? Because it sounds a lot like the tall man. Or something a little bit more out of this world. Maybe. Well, thank you so much. And what do you say we light some sweetgrass? Just for you. Now, I know we like to tell all kinds of stories here on the show, but like I said, this next interview is with a very special friend of mine, and I hope you all enjoy this great interview that we have set up, and who knows, stick around long enough, we just might release some bonus episodes. Alright everybody, well like I said, I have a very special guest. She's actually a very special person to me. She's actually my wife. She's a frequent contributor to the show. She's been one of the greatest supporting partners that I can ever ask for. She's actually the one that has provided us with this beautiful Twisted Bear studio. And she has some really good stories. And I brought her on the show today to tell her story. So without further ado, let's let my wife, Alexis, and I'll give you the time, okay?
Thank you for having me on here. Wow, got my name wrong straight out of the gate.
I apologize, I'm sorry.
Alright, I'll let that one slide. Sleeping on your own tonight. Yeah, I actually have a few cool stories. My mom is a social butterfly out here, so some of the people that she's introduced me to, I really didn't make the connections when I first moved out here, which was last year. I mean, I was on and off up here when I was a child, and on and off even in my adulthood. So I guess it all started when I first decided that I wanted a fresh start. I moved from the city. I was pregnant. I was tired. I just needed money. I was looking for a work-at-home job, and I just needed a little bit of extra side cash. Well, my mom suggested someone was looking for kind of like someone to take care of the property.
So in essence, a caretaker, right?
There you go. Yeah, thank you. So I was like, okay, I mean, this could be good. I mean, it's easy. I just get to walk the property, whatever. And it was 3 days a week. I mean, I could do that. I needed the exercise. At that point, I was like 180 pounds, being that pregnant. I could use the exercise for sure. So I reached out to the guy and told him that I was available and I could start immediately. And he was all for it. He was like, I can Venmo you because I currently live out of town. I was like, all right, cool. Not a big problem. He goes, but I do need to send you over some paperwork. And I was like, okay. I'm thinking like a W-2 or whatever. I didn't think too much into it. Well, he sent me the paperwork, and when I printed it out, I was reading over it, and it had things like, we are not responsible for any bodily injury. You cannot take people on to this site to show them or anything like that. I mean, this property was located, like, it was one of the properties located behind Skinwalker Ranch. So, and I didn't even know what Skinwalker Ranch was at that point. I didn't know it was like a big phenomenon or whatever. It was whatever to me. It was a job. So everything it started off as usual. He said the previous tenants had moved out. I was like, all right, cool. And so I started that night. I made my mom drive me out there because she's more familiar with the area than I was, and it was in the middle of nowhere. And keep in mind, I didn't know what reservations were. I didn't know. I just knew that Native people, lived out here. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't put two and two together.
Right.
So, you can call me ignorant all you want. I lived in a bubble. I lived out in the city, so she drove me out there, and the instructions were simple. I was to walk the property line, make sure the gate was locked, and make sure the house was locked. Simple. Easy, whatever. If there was any trespassers, I were to call the police and get them escorted off the property, whatever. I didn't think I was going to have a problem with trespassers because we were in the middle of nowhere. So I walked the property line. My mom stayed in the car and kind of just watched me walk the property line. And everything was normal. It was during the evening time. I usually did it in the evening because I also had another side gig that I did and to make extra money. So it was easy. The first few nights were really easy, and the following weeks after that, it was relatively normal. It wasn't until like a few weeks into the job that things started to get a little weird. So when I first originally stepped onto the property, I made sure everything was locked up. The house was unlocked, but you needed a code, and only he could provide the code. And I didn't even have the code to unlock the house. So it wasn't me going in and out of the house, and I was like, oh great, someone broke in. So I opened the door, I walked in, made sure no one was inside, locked it back up, and walked the property as usual. That was like the first of many things that started coming into play. And for some reason, I went and checked the property twice that day. I was like, there's just something really off about this. I have a really bad feeling. So I went and checked the property. Now keep in mind, I can't text or call anyone until I leave the property because I have no cell service out there. So when I got onto the property earlier that morning, made my rounds, everything was normal. It wasn't until I walked by this old, taken down chicken coop. I mean, it was still standing, but it was like broken down and just old and gross. So I'm starting to see all these flies. They're like blow flies. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I realized there's cameras. There's cameras all around the property, but I didn't realize there was one posted by this chicken coop. And I was following the blowflies, and I opened the door to the chicken coop, and there's a big orange barrel that looks like it's swollen. I mean, it was just barely holding on together. I mean, this is during the middle of summertime, so whatever was in there, it was swelling the barrel. And I couldn't smell anything because there was a tarp over it. So I couldn't tell you if it smelled bad. I couldn't tell you if it smelled good. I just know that there was a bunch of blowflies all around it. And they were just swarming it. And I was like, ew. I'll let who I need to let know that there's a barrel from the previous tenants still on this land that's swelling. So I continued on with my day. Later that night, I planned on going back to the property to check on it. And when I went back to the property, I did the circle around the house, and the bathroom window was open. Well, I didn't leave it open. And so I get like a stone, kind of like a brick from the actual foundation, because the foundation was crumbling, and stand up and kind of look inside the window. And I don't see anything, but I hear these loud, like manly footsteps, and I hear this woman scream, "Get out!" and the window shuts. And I'm totally just like in shock. I'm pregnant. I'm like, I don't know how anyone could fit through this window. Even if I wasn't pregnant, my post-pregnancy weight is around like 100, 110 pounds. That's pretty linky for me, and I couldn't fit through the window. And it was just set so high up that you actually needed a ladder to get into that window. And like I said, I didn't see anyone, I just heard them. So I made note of it, made a mental note. I was like, alright, so I gotta call the police because I'm not about to put myself in a situation with my unborn child. Walked the property, and I was noticing shell casings. Keep in mind the sun hasn't set yet, and I'm noticing there's a lot of shell casings around the property. Like, a lot. Almost like they were defending the house. I mean, the house was all boarded up, and like there was old cars on the lot. The windows had been shot out. Trees were... I don't know how I missed this. I guess I kind of just do what I need to do and just continue on with my day. So I thought that was really strange. And I kept walking the property line, and there was this foul, awful odor. I mean, it smelled like death. And there was no animals on the property. There wasn't anything living on that property. It was just an empty lot. And I tried to follow the smell, and I couldn't find it, and I was like, I cannot track this smell down, but something is dead out here. It is rotting. It like reeked the whole land by the time I got done walking the property line. It was that bad. And I'm walking back to my car, and I'm looking at the house, I'm looking at my car, I'm just kind of like looking all around, and the chicken coop door swings open, like really violently, and I turn around expecting to see something like emerge from the chicken coop, like, oh my gosh, an animal got stuck in there, whatever. And there was nothing there, but you could hear like a low grumbling growl, and I don't know how to describe it, but it felt like I was dreaming, like I slipped into some sort of like dream state, like I was floating, like everything was kind of just floating. and my heart rate was up, and you could just hear this low guttural growl. And me wanting to have more light than what the sun was giving me, I clicked on my car lights, and it lights up the whole cab inside. And there was actually like a person sitting in the middle of my car, like in the back seat. It was just the shape that was just like a kind of like a shadow figure. And at this point, it was either I deal with that or I deal with the growl coming from the chicken coop behind me. So my half lizard brain took off to my car, and I opened the 2 doors on the driver's side, made sure nothing was in it, shut the back door, got in the driver's side, sped off, and that was my last time doing my rounds on the evening side. It was way too bizarre, and I was just totally creeped out. I texted whoever I needed to about the property, let them know that there was people. I heard people, but I didn't actually see people. And I left out all the weird stuff that was going on, obviously, and just kept moving along. So I switched my shifts to early in the morning when it was nice and bright outside. So my next shift walked the property in the morning, and by this time the smell was so bad. And next to the house is like a huge pit, like a burning pit, and there was like random things in there. I mean, we're talking like diapers, oil, car parts, whatever they could throw in there, they threw in there. And I figured, it was coming from that. Maybe they put something bad in there, but I didn't notice it before. I walked by it. It definitely wasn't originating from there. It was originating from further back into the property, like deeper into the property line. So I walked the property line like I was supposed to, made sure everything was locked up. I noticed that people were leaving gifts on the property, like bags filled with something. And my mom told me ever since I was little, like, if you see things like that, you leave it alone. So I did, and just kind of kept going on my path. And it wasn't until I came across like these 3 piles of bones, and that's not where the stench was coming from either. They had been there for a long time. It was just literally a pile of bones, and one of them had a collar, so I assumed it belonged to someone, but they were just laying there. I mean, no animals had disturbed these bones. They literally just, it was like they laid on top of the property and just wasted away and decomposed there. They were totally not disturbed at all. And I kept going. I was like, whatever. Just kept going. It's a large land. Anything could happen here. Whatever. Kept going about my route. And that foul smell, I mean, it was just so sickening. And me being pregnant, I mean, I could, my nose is, I'm like a bloodhound. I mean, I could tell you if someone farted across the parking lot. That's how great my nose was. So I'm sitting there in the back of the property, just trying to figure out where this smell is coming from, because I know it's back here. I just couldn't find it. It turns out that what I was about to walk onto next wasn't supposed to happen, because there wasn't any livestock. But these 3 cows wandered onto the property, and each were in a different state of decomposition. So they wandered at different times onto the property, laid down, and died. No animals. I mean, there's a bunch of animal activity out there. I mean, you get your coyotes, your foxes, whatever. But no animal disturbed any of these remains that died on the property. They just came onto the property, laid down, and died. No one reported any cattle missing. I mean, no one was doing livestock back there. So there was no reason to even have these cows wander onto the property like that. And it was all fenced off. So there's another question. How did the cows get onto the property? They would have to come through a front gate to even get onto the property, and even then, I closed that every night. So how did these 3 cows wander on different times, lay down, and die with no animal activity? At that point, I'm like already freaked out. I'm walking back to the house. I cut my route short. I mean, the smell itself was just so awful. I started walking back, and I was gonna quit. Like, I couldn't do it anymore. Like, every time I walked onto the property, I always got a weird, fuzzy feeling. Like, I just felt like I was floating. Like, it was like a dreamlike state. So, I was heading back to my car. As fast as my little legs could carry me and my top heavy body, I was moving. And I saw a guy standing on the property, facing away. Now, keep in mind, I did let the owner of the property know that I did hear people on the property. They sent people out, and they couldn't find anyone. Everything was locked up, so they couldn't figure out how they got inside and how they were able to lock it and whatever else, because you also just, it takes finagling to lock it. So it's just, you'd have to know the property in order to know how to do that. So I'm thinking, oh great, I'm either dealing with the past tenant or I'm dealing with trespassers. The past tenants had left like a good amount of their stuff on the property, so it wouldn't be surprising to me if it was a past tenant. So I'm shouting to this guy. He's got suspenders on, he's wearing jeans, and he's got cowboy boots on, and he's got a beard and long brown hair. And I'm like, can I help you? You know, just trying to be polite, whatever. I'm out here. And I start seeing more people emerge. Like, it was like a family. And they wouldn't talk to me. Like, they didn't even look at me. Like, it was like I wasn't even there. So I was like, okay. And I tried. Like, I even, like, stepped in front of this man at one point. And I was like, can I help you? It was such a weird feeling because he just looked right past me. Like, I didn't even exist. I mean, I'm great at ignoring people, but that was amazing work. So I'm like, whatever. I don't have cell reception. I'm not even going to do this right now. I got in my car. I was already having a weird day. Drove off till I got cell reception. Texted the owner. I was like, hey, there's some people on the property. Do you want me to just call the police and have them figure it out, or do you want to call them yourself? Then he got back to me later on that night, and he goes, I just went through the cameras. I'm really confused on what you're talking about, because you were the only one on the property. There was nobody else on the property. And I'm like, the people by the house, like, I know that house has security cameras. It's got at least 4 of them. I know they were right in sight of the camera. And he's like, no. He goes, the only thing I caught was you standing there for about 10 minutes. And then you got back in your car and you left. I was so shook. I asked him to send over the video footage. And I actually got to see that what I thought I was talking to, I was just standing there for a whole 10 minutes.
Whoa. So it almost sounds like you were communicating with, I mean, we talk a lot about, you know, displaced spirits and stuff like that on this show, but I mean, do you think you were talking to, maybe, God, that's really creepy just in general, just because you, on the camera, you're, what, just standing there?
Yeah, I was just standing there. It was almost like, it felt like residual energy.
Right, that would explain why he was looking through you, because to that entity, it was a replay as opposed to it being an actual person.
Right, yeah.
Now, had you had any interaction with these people prior to this or after this?
There was nobody to even talk to besides the people that own the property. And a few days actually after that occurred, like, I told him, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, he goes, I just need you to do one more thing for me. I was like, okay. He goes, we can get it done in one day. I was like, all right, as long as it's during the daytime, because I won't do it during the night. He said the tenants were going to come in and clean up the property and get the rest of their things. Okay, I'll meet them there in the morning. And then there was someone that was going to buy a part of the land that was supposed to come out and look at the property, and I was supposed to show them around. I can also do that. Not a big deal. And when I pulled up to the property to meet the previous tenants, that's exactly who I saw a few days before. And they weren't the most social people either. I mean, only the male, I assumed to be the husband, because there was a son and there was like 2 daughters and a wife. The girls would not look at me. They would not talk to me at all. My existence did not matter at all to them. If they had something to say, they would say it to their husband or to him, and he would either relay it back to me or just talk himself to me. So the whole, like, mannerism things was just, it was really weird. So that was like a really, but I know that's who I saw. Like, that's exactly who I saw. I saw him. Like, he was wearing the same, like, everything. So I was so shook that I was like, okay, let's just keep this short and simple. So they cleaned up the property, they got their stuff, they headed out. Well, the tenants were actually so obsessed with this property and so addicted to the property that they actually just moved down the way. They were forced out of the property because they were treating it so badly. And so they moved actually just down the street so they could still be close to the property and still have some kind of connection to it. And I thought that was really interesting. And so I left and I came back at the time that guy wanted to look at the property and basically just check it out. And my mom came along that time and they were walking the land. I was walking the land with them. Everything was normal. And he's like, what is that smell? I was like, oh yeah, some cattle died in the back. I don't know. That's just weird. And like, I'm sure you'll have that removed before you buy the land or whatever. And he's like, oh, okay, no problem. And he made his way, so the property, you can loop around the house down by the kind of stream area and back up and then around towards the chicken coop. So, a complete circle. And he's like, oh, what are all these flies? These are blowflies. And it's like, yeah, there's a bin in there that's smelling. And I told him it was really gross. I was like, I am way too scared to uncover it because if it does smell bad, I don't want to smell it. And he goes, well, I can smell it. I'm surprised you can't. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Whatever. And he opens the chicken coop up and there's even more flies. I mean, they are covering the walls of the inside of the chicken coop at this point. It was disgusting. And what was holding the tarp on to the barrel was just 2 bungee cords wrapped around it. But that was even it swelled even worse than when I first saw it. So he undoes the bungee cords, and I take a step back because I'm already convinced that this thing's going to explode and I don't want to wear whatever's in it. And all the blowflies are just going crazy. They are just getting amped up that you are disturbing this barrel. And he uncovers it, screams at the top of his lungs, doesn't even recover it, and just walks out. He got in his car and he left. My mom goes in and she goes, what happened? What did you do now? I was like, oh, I just looked at him, Mom, and he thought I was hideous and walked off. I don't know. He looked inside that barrel. She goes, what barrel? And I was like, the barrel that's in the coop. I was like, it's been there forever. I was like, it's smelling, it's gross. I still can't smell anything at this point. I just see the flies. And she goes in there and she throws up. She's like, that's the inside. It's literally organs and stuff of something from something's body in the inside of that barrel. It was just all filled to the brim of just organs and innards of whatever. And after she just left. I got my car. When my mom just leaves, when she just leaves me there with no explanation, I just left. I didn't know what to do. I wasn't gonna go look. I texted the owner when I got cell service, and basically he asked me not to come back onto the property, which was weird because earlier in the weeks, to backtrack it just a little bit, I was actually supposed to be the new tenant that took over that property. I was supposed to actually rent it out and be the caretaker of that property that just lived on the land. So they were going to fix up the home and everything else, but I was invited not to come back to that land after they discovered that barrel. And I still don't know what happened. He said he would call the authorities. I will never know to this day what was actually in that barrel. And so that's my scary story, one of many that I have from around the res, I guess.
Wow. Well, first off, I want to say thank you again to my beautiful wife coming onto the show and telling this story. This story, I mean, leaves me with way more questions as opposed to answers. And before we put out the fire tonight, I really wanted to take this time to sort of break down the story piece by piece as to, you know, the most weird things about this story. I mean, kicking off the fact that this is located so close to Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, there's always been a lot of unexplained, sort of odd paranormal-ish incidences that are related to this area. So the fact that first, let's point out the very first one about the family that was there but wasn't there. I mean, you know, they say cameras don't lie. I mean, but being in the age we're in, you know, cameras can, but feeling like you're talking to someone and they're not, I mean, that's pretty scary in and of itself to know that you were just standing there. I mean, could it have been time displacement? Could it have been an illusion, holograms? I mean, there's definitely something more at play there. As well. Another thing I wanted to kind of touch on is the livestock issue about them just finding livestock on the property. Now, I've worked in the oil field for about 10 years, and it's not uncommon to find livestock like cows out in the oil field, you know, dead center in the middle, just dead, wasting away. It was told to me years ago by an experienced oil field hand that they had actually used cows to sort of detect what they call H2S gas, which is hydrogen disulfide, which is an extremely poisonous gas. Those of you that know that this is a very hazardous, poisonous gas, odorless, tasteless. And so they sort of gauge that with this livestock when they find them. So I mean, that could be something that could be very explainable. The property that she's talking about, I know, kind of resides close to the oil field area, so I would imagine that might be somewhat of an explanation for that. But the last thing I really wanted to point out was the fact that the barrel. I mean, I want to know what's in it. I want to know what was in it. But at the same time, I don't. And it's probably something that we shouldn't speculate too long on. But, I mean, what do you think it was? What do you think could have been in that barrel? Let me know in the comments what you think it could be, what you think it might be. Because it was definitely enough to shake these people and these individuals. But with all that being said, I want to say thank you thank you so much again to my beautiful wife, Alexis. I got your name right. Thank you for coming on to the show. Thank you for being just the most amazing support system and providing us, like I said, with this Twisted Bear Studio, which if you listen to the True Crime podcast, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But I know you have a lot of questions about what we speculate here on the show. But we'll have to have you back on. We'll have to have you come back on and we can talk. I know you have more stories and I can't wait to get to those stories because I know this one definitely gave me chills, and I hope that the rest of the stories that you do tell on this show rattle the rest of your bones. So once again, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Anytime you need me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, this concludes our bonus interview episode of Scary Stories to Tell from the Res. But just to make sure nothing follows you home, I asked the Creator to watch over you, keep you safe, so you can go on in a good way. So we'll remember, everybody, be blessed, be safe, and always stay scary.